So the first session today is nearly all panels. Panels is where we try and get down into some detail. There's quite often disagreement between the panelists or the audience and the panelists, which I think helps. It allows people to see a more rounded picture and understand it for more issues than a standard presentation. Every presentation is recorded. It's uploaded at the end of this month, so if you have to pop out during the presentation, you can play it back to your heart's content. We've got the technical editor of World Sports Activewear to chair this panel on material matters. I was chatting to Sophie months ago about a suitable topic. And one of the things that is an undercurrent to this industry, especially with the incoming EU Green Deal, is we need to know our impacts. And you most probably heard a lot of the publicity attached to Higg Company last year around the Higg Index. Higg Company is, of course, now worldly. Just to add a further level of confusion, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, which moderates the data, is still the SAC. In Europe, we already have the environmental impact assessment, which is the French system. The EU Green Deal is bringing in product environmental footprints. If you're confused at what I've just said, that's why we're having this panel. We need to know the provenance of our product. And there are several ways to crack that nut. And Sophie's panel will come on stage in about 2 minutes' time. They'll introduce themselves. Chances are they'll go straight into serious level discussion. There will be questions. They are very, very happy to try and explain things further. But in 2 minutes' time, the first panel starting, Sophie Bramel's Material Matters. Thank you. Second tip from those people who weren't here yesterday, don't let Charles know you're in the audience, because when I know your name, I come and pick on you.
So let me sit on the, I'll sit on the, yeah, on the edge. So I just made one slide with your information on the difference between primary and secondary data. Okay. And you'll be able to see it, yeah. Good morning, and welcome to the first panel talk of the day at Performance Days, where we're going to try and dig in deeper into the world of sustainable materials, assessing how the choice of raw material is just one element that has to be taken into account. So we're going to dig deep into supply chain workings this morning with a great lineup of speakers that each have a specific view and outlook to share with us this morning. Anna, can you start? Can you please, each of you, briefly introduce yourselves and the companies you work for?
It's checking, working. Hello everyone. I know it's early morning to say some smart things today, but I'll try my best. My name is Anna. I come from Switzerland. I created my company almost 5 years ago, and we are doing the new generation of breathable waterproof membranes for the outdoor textile industry in particular. And our vision is to go PFAS, solvent-free, and really to remove all the typical product that you'll find maybe in the current industry with this new product. And by background, I'm a chemical engineer, specialized in material science, so I hope I can bring some things to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Diederik?
Yeah, my name is Diederik Janssen. I work for Unifi. I've been with Unifi for over 12 years. I'm working in textiles for, I guess, 30 years. Unifi is a company that makes polyester and nylon yarns. We're an international company based in the US, and we make reprieve, recycled nylon and polyester yarns. I think we're one of the market leaders in that field. And we try to bring, innovative, sustainable products to the market. Whenever we can, we do a lot of research, and we have some pretty nice products in our portfolio.
Thank you. Mathieu, please.
Good morning, everyone. Mathieu Liebaert. I'm the general manager of Liebaert Textiles. We're a Belgian textile company. We specialize in elastic warp and circular knits for a wide range of industries, going from intimate, sportswear, medical, and technical textiles. We've been in the business since 137 years now. So for us, it's always been about innovation and sustainability. So I hope I can give you some insights on what we do in terms of sustainability and what sustainability really means in terms of elastic fabrics.
Thank you. So one of the reasons why I chose this topic is that it was pointed out to me not too long ago that switching a raw material, say from polyester to recycled polyester, has an impact on a product's footprint, but it has a minor impact in the order of about 10 to 15%. So you're making progress, but you're not getting that far. And this is why, that if you want the math behind the 10%, 15% that I have, so it's based on Higg data, and I forgot to make a slide, apologies for that. So the carbon footprint of recycled polyester is 42% less than virgin polyester, roughly. Raw materials account for 30% of a product's general impacts, usually. Do you agree, more or less? And so switching the raw material, you're taking 30% to 42%, and you get a 13% reduced environmental footprint. And I'm supposing it's, carbon footprint. So this, for all of a sudden realizing, so what's the easy solution, which has brought us to use organic cotton instead of conventional cotton, to use recycled polyester instead of polyester, is probably pretty good, but it just gets you only so far. So I wanted to start this conversation this morning with the raw materials that are used to make performance fibers and membranes. And I wanted to start with Diederik, because Unifi makes all, as I've seen, the conventional polyester. We'll probably stick to unless there's something happening in nylon, but polyester recycled from PET bottles, and polyester made from ocean-bound plastics. So what are the differences in environmental impacts and between those three categories as Unifi produces them?
Right. Well, there is a significant benefit when you switch from virgin polyester to recycled polyester in terms of the sustainability data that you get. Usually, water usage, energy usage, greenhouse gas emissions. So all these, let's say, data show that it has a very positive impact to use a recycled polyester, even if it's some plastic bottles, versus a conventional polyester made from oil derivatives.
Okay. And there's also the fact that, Mathieu, I'm turning to you. So polyester has this easy post-consumer material that can be it can use to be recycled. It's fairly clean. It's the water bottles that we all have. For nylon, the situation is a bit different because there is no post-consumer nylon that's easy to recycle into new fibers. But that doesn't mean that nylon is not a sustainable fiber in itself and can be produced in a responsible way. So my question is, what measures have you taken to reduce the environmental footprint of the fabrics you make? And you've mentioned in the past that you are one of the few companies to be certified ISO 50001. So can you tell us briefly, if possible, what makes this standard special and the fabrics that you produce, what makes them sustainable?
I'll start with the ISO 50001. So ISO 50001 is an energy management system, so it's comparable to like ISO 9001 for quality. So basically what we have to do with a 50001 is that you have to map out your complete energy consumption for your complete production. And you have to come up with a plan to decrease your energy consumption on a yearly basis. Whether it's through new machines or being more efficient in your water management or the way that you produce. So automatically that has an impact on your carbon footprint. To answer your questions on our fabrics is because I think 99% of our fabrics are polyamide fabrics, are elastane polyamide fabrics. If we look at life cycle assessment of a polyamide 6 Liebaert fabric, for example, about 45% of the footprint is produced by the fibers, and about 55% is produced by the production. There's something that we should keep in mind here is the fact that we only source with European suppliers. So we source locally, which has a huge impact. We source with suppliers that have very sustainable production, which also has a very big impact. So if we would source, for example, somewhere in Asia and ship those yarns from Asia to Belgium, the impact of the fibers on our life cycle assessment of our fabric would be much, much higher. So that's a really important part that people should, keep in mind is when you look at a supplier is, look at their complete supply chain. It's not because you source locally that, you have a fabric with a low life cycle assessment. I think, you should look at the complete supply chain. But what we do at Liebaert, it goes much further than that. I think, we source locally. We only use green energy, whether it's from our own solar panels or from our suppliers, which has a big impact on energy consumption. And
we'll get to that later, yeah.
So that's a big, important part. And for us, I think water is very important as well. So we're investing more in, we have our own water purification installation. So now next year, we'll be investing in an extra purification step so that we can partially reuse the water in our production.
Good. Anna, let me ask you a question. One of the reasons why I wanted you to be part of this panel is there was a LinkedIn post about switching or investigating the possibility of making a bio-based membrane. And you, the company at least, or you maybe, explained all the different criteria that came into your decision. And you found out that bio-based was of interest, but not necessarily as interesting or it wasn't a giant step in sustainability that one would think. Can you walk us through the audience that did not read that LinkedIn post?
Yes, so to give a little bit of background, we are really trying to, when we take a decision on a product, we really are looking at all the different parameters, and this also involves negative one. And we really want to be transparent about why are we choosing now this material, which has maybe just 50% bio-based and not the 99% bio-based, but because of other parameters that are also super important. like food competition and all this type of aspects as well. And so when we wrote this article, we didn't want it to bash on bio-based material. We just wanted to like show the backstory to it, because it sounds so great, and everyone is saying bio-based materials, but no one is actually putting a percentage on it, and also not putting the source actually. So is it a food source? Does it take land use that you could be used for food, etc.? So those are aspects that are super important when choosing raw materials, besides actually just the chemical aspect. And but we do applaud still the effort being made right now into creating bio-based material, because it's not easy, giving also the restrictions or what the brands want. They still want stretch. They still want something that is nice to wear. They still want a perfect material with the perfect impact and the perfect everything. And at some point, we just need to be very clear about this is nice, this can be worked on. And this is really what we are trying to do at Dimpora. Given our scientific background, I think we are in the right space to be able to teach to some extent B2B and B2C.
Yeah. And so have you found in your customers, do they still want the bio-based even if there are caveats and it's not perfect?
Yeah, actually, as soon as I pronounce the word bio-based, they're like, okay, let's go. And and I'm like, wait 1 second. I just wanted to let you know that this is this, and this is still just 62%, and and then the rest, and then they're like, oh, okay, I didn't think about it, and then they start. It's kind of an education to some extent, but I think they appreciate the transparency, and I try also to push this when I'm sourcing materials. I'm always asking a lot of annoying questions.
Yeah, well, that's good. So let me ask Mathieu some annoying questions, because there are bio-based nylons. There's the castor bean oil polyamide 11, there are polyamide 10s and something or other. So have you considered using those bio-based nylons, and if not, or if so, why?
Yeah, we certainly considered it. The problem with like a polyamide 11 is it's 3 to 5 times more expensive than a standard polyamide. The quality is not good at all.
Oh.
If I ask my suppliers, and I asked one of them yesterday, I said, hey, what do you think of bio-based? Would it fit our products? They say, you don't want to touch it. So,
really?
Yeah. So it's, for us, bio-based is not I mean, we could, but there's not a customer in the world that's going to say, hey, you know what? We're going to pay 3 times the price of the fabric. We're going to accept the fact that the quality is going to be less. And at the end of the day, if you look at the life cycle assessment of a bio-based compared to recycled, it's much higher. So yeah, it's for us, it's not an option.
Yeah, apparently there's a study by the University of Sheffield. They comparing virgin polymers to bio-based ones, and the virgin had a better LCA, because what adds to the load of the bio-based were the costs of fertilizer, transportation, harvesting, and so it's not that simple. Diederik, I've got to ask you the same question about the bio-based polyesters. I'm sure Unifi has looked into that.
Yeah, we pay particular attention to these kind of products, and we've made bio-based polyesters in the past. But I think we in very simple terms, polyester is made out of 2 components. It's an alcohol and an acid. It's whiskey and vinegar put together with a catalyst, and then you get polyester, in simple terms. But a bio-based polyester today means that you replace the alcohol, the MEG, ethylene glycol, with a bio-based product. And so that bio-based products come from biosources, great, but MEG only accounts for 30% of the makeup of polyester. So you're replacing 30% of the polyester with a bio-based product. The rest is still from oil derivatives. Right. So for us, it doesn't really make sense to do that. The LCA wouldn't be particularly positive for us or for anyone. And the other thing is it's more expensive.
Right.
It's more expensive, and it is not scalable. You know, it's very hard to find scale. So I think we keep a look at these new products, but until they become scalable, efficient, you know, cost-effective, we will shy away from them a little bit.
Well, I would, you know, I've written a number of articles on this in WSA, and I would have thought that at some point, because polyester is such a big market, that there would be research and investment, and a fully bio-based polyester would. But it's been 20 years that research has been done, and it's so very difficult to get the other portion. Bio-based?
It is. It's not a product that is naturally occurring.
Yeah.
So you really have to refine it. You know, it's easy to make alcohol.
Right.
You know, we all know that. But it's more difficult to make the PTA, the terephthalic acid that we use for the make of polyester. So, yes, it's there are some solutions, but they are extremely expensive.
Right.
So until we get that scale and the prices down, the market will just not accept it. So for us, we have other solutions that have a better LCA, are much cheaper and much more scalable.
Okay. Mathieu talked about geographical location and sourcing and how important that can be in a product's environmental footprint. Anna, can you tell us how, because you don't actually produce the Dimpora membrane. You have it produced by partner manufacturers. So how do you choose them? And I was about the geographical location, but then there's also that PFAS and PFC issue, which must be important. Can you tell us both sides of the equation?
So the reality is that we are, when at the beginning we were very much of a baby company, so-called startup, and there you're just happy if someone agrees to work with you.
Yeah.
So I think saying that we were already there, being very difficult about who to work with, would be an exaggeration. But the more we grow, the more also we know the industry, the more we are aware of what we want to stand in our values, etc. And so now we start to be a little bit more picky, and we just started actually start really having a questionnaire where they have to say, and actually also sign documents that no child labor, all these things, and in particular, as you mentioned, the PFAS, because our whole DNA is to produce a PFAS-free membrane, and also contamination is a huge issue. Even though they wouldn't use PFAS in the production of our membrane, if in the machine before us they produce something containing PFAS, it's going to appear in our product. And now with the new regulation coming in, we would be liable, and that would actually destroy our brand if you ever found PFAS in our product. So we need to be very careful about that, and if we have to work with a company that does still work with PFAS, which might still happen, we need to be very careful about testing for fluorine before sending it there, after getting it, so we can trace it back if in case someone tests it in a jacket in the stores at some point with our membrane inside, and then there was PFAS inside, where did it come from? And we can say, wasn't for us, we measured that and that.
But you have manufacturers in Asia and in Europe for the membrane today, no?
Yeah, as today, the full supply chain is in Europe. Actually in Germany and Switzerland. Everyone has big eyes and oh my God, how do you do price-wise, etc. But I mean, it's, of course, there is a little bit of more price, but we reach okay prices actually. And we are still building up our supply chain in Asia now. We are targeting Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. The reason is that we feel more trusty towards the country, and we visit them quite often already, and those are for big volumes and to be able to work with big outdoor brands.
Right.
So the smaller brands, that value European production, we want to keep a certain volume produced in Europe, and for the rest we have to scale in Asia. There's no way around it.
Okay. Diederik, I understand that Unifi has factories or partners all over the world. Is there, Is there a difference in impacts with the country of provenance if we look at the energy grid, for instance? And so that's one thing. But the second thing, do your buyers care, their client, your customers?
So I'll answer the first question first. So yes, yeah, we are a global company. You know, we're based in the US. We have production in Asia. We have some production in Turkey. We have production in South America, and we recently completed a long LCA data capture for all our individual factories, for all the products, or not all the products, all the categories of products that we manufacture. And we see there are some regional differences. And so this is to be attributed to mostly the energy usage. You know, when you produce in China, you don't use the same kind of energy as when you produce in the US, for example. I live in Switzerland. I mean, our energy is kind of super clean.
Right.
It's maybe not the case in China. But then when you save that energy making your product, then you have some very impactful LCA data changes. So yes, we see differences between the different countries. Then do the buyers care? It is not the first thing that they think about, unfortunately. But but I think for us at least, having that supply chain in different countries, in different manufacturing areas where it's of importance is a good thing, especially for them, for that whole supply chain.
Right. Yeah, they can possibly reduce transportation costs and
they reduce
impacts.
transportation, the impact generally, yes.
Okay. There's another area that when we were preparing this talk, Mathieu raised, was the importance of using primary data to assess a product's real impacts instead of choosing from any of the secondary data sources that the industry tends to use today. And so he gave me a number of the numbers that you had for virgin polyamides. Can you walk us through all that?
So yeah, we did LCA on our fabrics, and of course we have primary data for our production. We didn't, the first time we did an LCA, we didn't have primary data on the fibers yet. So it was nice to see and compare the data we got from, the EcoVent database. So the secondary data you see, it's 2.17 on the fibers. But if you look at the primary data we received from our European suppliers, it was 1.25. So it was almost divided by 2. So there's a big difference between what you see and what you find in the databases with secondary data compared to the primary data you get from your European suppliers. So it represents a big impact for us. So yeah, that's the importance for me for primary data instead of secondary data, for sure.
It makes a big difference. I did not do my math well. Sorry about that. Anna, on the same, as we're talking about all the different impacts that a product can have, there's also the matter of end of life. And as I understand, circularity is part of the DNA of the Dimpora concept. So what type of end-of-life solutions will you be able to offer or promise to the brands that you work with?
I just want to point out a little comments on the LCA before I go into these details.
Please do, yeah.
I think LCA is a hit word right now. It's a tool to calculate emission. It costs a lot to do it, like a lot. Yeah. Like just a regular LCA, you would have to get into the 20K. For an ISO certified LCA, you will have that you can actually compare yourself with maybe other brands, or the thing you have to go into 100,000 euro. It's not like I'm going to do an LCA, just as a base. And secondary, I feel like everyone, really great message about the primary and secondary data. But at the end of the day, an LCA is very much of like, until where do you want to have a look? And nobody is really super transparent of when did it start, when did they finish, and those data really needs to be taken carefully and not like as a, not religious, but not the Holy Bible type of thing. So be careful about when you see LCA, it's just not like it's not hardcore science. That's maybe just my point.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, but it should be hardcore science, but it's not.
Yeah, but everyone does it in LCA a little bit like they want and how they got the data from. And just need to be pointed out.
Yeah. If I may add,
Yes, please
I mean,
do.
we've done the same. You know, we've done the LCA, we've done the big one.
Yeah.
The 100K one.
Nice,
And so
congrats.
it's all ISO thing, but it's also peer reviewed. I think it's very important. People put out numbers that they don't even know where they're coming from. So we have to be very careful. So yeah, I think you're right to your point. Absolutely.
If I'm going to heckle from the audience, LCA is a very major subject. And so I'm going to move this down a level so the audience can join in. And LCA will give you your carbon, your water, and your waste, and up to 30 other factors. Now, I can do an LCA with 4 factors in. Christine could do an LCA with 35 factors in, and they will give completely different results. Because it's a man in white coat does the science, we all think LCAs are highly comparable, as Anna has said. But it's adding to the confusion, in my opinion. But I've interrupted your panel.
No, thank you,
bring
Charles,
everyone
thank
on board.
you. Yeah. So
On end of life now.
let's talk about end of life
Sorry,
now.
just for the parentheses. So end of life is in our vision very important. Like how, I mean, as a chemical engineer, we are creating new products, and we somehow need to be responsible of also how to get rid of them afterwards. And many people just like, I'm just gonna make a new product and I'm gonna earn a lot of money with it. But like, just think ahead a little bit, like, and think, okay, now I'm producing this. How can I tell my brands, partners, or customer to get rid of them when it's done? And I'm not even talking about post-consumer, because this is so complicated subject of, but just maybe post-industrial waste, just at this stage already, like being able to give a solution to the problem of waste and gathering of volumes, and maybe also collaboration between everyone to get the right volumes to start recycling. And on this, we have really decided with Dimpora to work with membranes that are not going to hinder or not going to stop a possible recycling of fabrics, because people want polyester, they want polyamides as fabrics, there are going to be elastane, there are going to be tons of materials, and if we add again to the mix a membrane with another material, so we start to have a bundle of very difficult things to recycle. So the idea was to be able to provide to the brand, so if you use this membrane with these fabrics, and using this end-of-life strategy, you should be able to recycle everything. Whether they do it or not, it's not my problem anymore.
Okay.
But at least I have good conscience and I provided a solution. But it goes into the monomateriality thoughts. And our process of membrane making allows us to choose the materials that we want to make a membrane from. So we are very free to decide on what materials to use for making membrane. Before everyone asks, nylon 6 it's almost impossible. Just wants to stay.
Let's stay on the topic of recyclability for a little bit. So we've been recycling PET bottles into polyester for years now. And this is considered an open loop recycling, not a closed loop. Diederik, can you tell us about any progress at Unifi to recycle textiles into textiles, and what that, what it entails on an everyday basis?
It's a very big subject right now, and
Yes.
bottles were super popular 5 years ago, and today nobody wants to talk about that.
I know. Yes.
So I think we are seeing the beginnings of a textile to fiber recycling in the polyester world. We have a product already that is available at scale, but where we recycle post-industrial waste.
Right.
But it has to be very specific. It has to be 100% polyester, et cetera, et cetera. But we can do it. I think the discussion about the bottle, is it linear? Is it circular? Is it whatever you want to call it? There is a bit of circularity, because you can take a bottle, turn it into a textile, and then that textile back into another fiber or something. So it's not all that bad.
Well, I learned yesterday that in India and China, you cannot recycle bottles into bottles.
That is correct.
So
certain
the only
countries-
solution is textiles.
People think that you can take a bottle and recycle it, an infinite number of times back into a bottle. And, bottle manufacturers, if they take recycled polyester, they will melt it. And that melting, let's say, the polyester will start to degrade. And so they need very high quality polyester. So they need to build the polyester chains back up or whatever. So it has a cost for them. So they don't really want to do it, although it's probably the right thing to do. So the textile industry is still a very good outlet for those bottles. And you're right, in China, in India, and I think even in Turkey, the bottles are not really recyclable back into bottles because the government don't allow it.
It doesn't, yeah. Okay. Tell me, Mathieu, what about recycling your own nylon elastane blend fabrics? So this is a very difficult topic, and if you can go into the details for our audience, that would be good. But do you think a solution can be found that may not be closed loop, but maybe an open loop solution? If nothing else is possible.
Yeah, open loop. We're already looking into some solutions with some of our suppliers. So there's certainly ways to recycle the blends and use the polymers for something else than for fibers. Closed loop, I have my doubts. I think we'll probably get somewhere, but to say it's going to be 100% recycled fibers, I think they'll probably blend it with other virgin polymers and try and solve it that way.
And what solutions are you seeing? Are they like melting the elastane out because it has a lower, I don't know. I mean, is it possible? What kind of separation can we imagine between nylon and elastane?
I think there's a couple of solutions. The solution that we're looking into, I think, is more mechanical. Okay. But yeah, I think I should ask the suppliers and what they're actually working on because I don't have the details.
Okay. All right. So moving on to my last topic is the evolution of legislation and transparency. How will these impact sustainability claims and help combat greenwashing? So let's start with the European among us, Mathieu. What is the impact of European legislation on your day-to-day activities? Is it good, or can laws have unintended consequences for companies producing in Europe?
I was looking forward to this question. For me, I think the European legislation and the Green Deal it's a good thing. But it's only a good thing if everybody that supplies to Europe has to fulfill the same requirements, which is not at all the case. So, we're a little bit, we're trying to run when we cannot even walk. We're trying to be this, I call it the knight in the green armor. But in my opinion, we're just being hypocrites because we're making it very difficult for our own textile industry. We're increasing administration costs. We're increasing costs in general because of all these requirements. But at the same time, we keep on importing everything from countries that don't have to fulfill those requirements. So yes, it's a good thing, but it's only a good thing if everybody has the same playing field.
Anna, as a company based in Switzerland, so you're not in the Green Deal, but how important is the European Union's legislation and digital passports and PEFs and Green Deals?
So I do not have info on this, but I do believe that Switzerland will just, as usual, follow EU guidelines. It's just gonna be a little bit later. And for us as a young company, it's definitely big because we were aiming higher in terms of sustainability, whatever the meaning of sustainability is. But we were already a bit, we had the luck to actually start fresh and not be bound by how many years of existence. So we really could just decide what to do, how to do it from scratch. And so for us, it's a we're super happy about those. Mostly about the PFAS ban, obviously,
Right.
for obvious reasons. But I do see and I hear a lot of stories of small companies that are going to struggle. And it's, I have the impression it needs to be an overshooting in requirements, and maybe over the years they're going to be a bit more, like it's overshooting and then going down a little bit to reality maybe, which is somehow also a necessary thing, because if there are no legislation, there is no chance, changes, sorry. And even some certification are just waiting for legislation to change. So this is not a topic, but I would strongly believe that it's necessary.
Diederik, what's your position at Unifi?
Well, for us, I mean, we don't produce in Europe, so we could say, oh, this is, it's your problem. But it's not, because it affects everyone in the supply chain, all the way to the brands. So the brands are starting to feed back to us that, they need more circularity, they need more recycle, they need more transparency and traceability. So these are all things that we have to provide, even though we manufacture in China or in Turkey or in the US, doesn't really matter. So it does affect us. But I think it affects us in a good way. The only thing I would say is that legislation seems to be pretty tough. I think you've alluded to that. And I think we need to give our industry the time to make those adaptations. The solutions will come, but they cannot come overnight. But the fact that we have legislation is good, because it will force us to do something about it. But give us time.
Okay, thanks. So that covers the main topics I wanted to cover this morning. Let's open the questions to the audience.
But before
Charles,
we open
please.
the questions to the audience, can I ask you to show your appreciation for the four of them up there? And can I make a personal reflection? Not so much for the panel, that was intelligence at 9:15 in the morning. Don't feel that it was easily comprehensible. These guys are specialists in their subjects. This talk will be uploaded by the end of this month. You can follow it in a bit more detail. There are areas there that my knowledge was expanding, and I'm going, wow, I hadn't really looked at it from that point of view. But I'm filling until I see a hand go up for questions. Otherwise, I'm going to ask them a really low-level question, which is the low price of oil actually causing one of the problems? Much earlier on, you talked about the high price of the alternatives. Is it because we have an unbalanced price on fossil fuel?
Of course, in terms of polyester, virgin polyester and recycled polyester are two of the same products. But virgin comes from oil, and so is the price of virgin polyester is defined by oil prices and market demand. The recycled polyester has now followed a different kind of market dynamic. So the price of recycled polyester is, let's say, disconnected from the price of virgin. Of course, if the oil price is low, virgin prices are low, and then it tends to get people to think, I can save a lot of money if I go back to virgin. But I think the ones who have made the switch are not really necessarily coming back. They're rather putting pressure on us to lower our prices rather than going back to virgin. But it can happen that they will get back to virgin. But the oil prices are low, but they fluctuate a lot, so yeah, it's hard to say.
I'm still waiting to see a question. But, Christine.
Hi, thank you very much for the very interesting panel. I have a question that points to the LCAs that have been mentioned for comparing bio-based polyester versus the virgin polyester, and I understood that the bio-based polyester had a higher impact compared to the virgin one. And I have 2 points actually. So first of all, I wonder what the LCA of textile to textile recycled polyester would look like compared to the PET bottle polyester. PET bottle polyester is usually mechanically recycled, and the textile to textile is chemically recycled, where I would think that this is a tougher process that requires more resources So maybe you have an answer to that question.
So we at Unifi, we don't do chemical recycling, but we know that the chemical recycling is a more, let's say, intensive and energy usage is bigger when you do chemical recycling. We do thermal mechanical recycling. On the bio-based, we don't really have data to be able to compare, so I really don't want to say anything, but it seems logical that against virgin, which has been established for so long, and where all the processes have been optimized, that if you talk of like a bio-based, it will have a higher LCA, probably. In terms of, let's say, PET bottle or textile to fiber, it depends on the process. Chemical recycling will have a little bit more usage of energy, so your LCA will be a little bit less for that.
So my point is now, I would think that these newer alternatives, like the bio-based or the textile to textile, they might have a higher impact, but on the other hand, it's also the future because we want to get away from virgin fossil fuels. So it's also a question of mindset than just comparing LCA, right?
I think you're right. I think Charles said, LCA is a bit of a dangerous thing because you play around with data and you play around with numbers and people think, oh, if I have a number that's lower than the other one, then this is the right thing to do. Maybe not, maybe not. So LCA is only a part of, let's say, the global data that you need to look at in choosing your materials. And some materials might be right for one application and another one which has maybe a worse LCA data for another. So obviously textile to fiber recycling seems better than bottle to fiber, better than virgin. So everyone has its place, and LCA data is just something that helps you make a choice, but it shouldn't be the one that makes you make your choice, in my opinion.
Also, if I may, typically it's always all about CO2, and there are so much more than that, And now everyone is looking at CO2 equivalent number, but like nobody looks at ecotoxicity in the long run, in the product life, at the end of life, the impact on the flora, fauna, etc. So those are things that right now nobody talks about in LCAs, and it's also a problem. So I don't like always pointing problems, but all these sustainable things needs to be taken very carefully, because it's not because there is a very, very low CO2 impact that you're not producing a super toxic product. And just to have this in mind when you do your LCAs.
I just wanted to jump in on what you said about getting rid of fossil-based fibers. I know that that's what everybody wants, but I think that we should be realistic and say it's not realistic. Even if we plant the whole world with castor plants, we won't be able to fulfill the global demand of fibers. So that's one thing. In polyamide, for example, if we look at post-consumer waste, which is pre-consumer waste, which is pretty big now for recycled fibers, there's no pre-consumer waste without virgin production. So that's something that we should keep into at the back of our heads and say, okay, fossil-based, everything that we're doing is finding ways to reduce the uses of fossil-based, but saying we're going to completely, stop with fossil-based fibers is not realistic, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you that it's not black and white, and that it's about really looking closely into the data and then compare, and also for which application. I just got this feeling during the conversation that it got a tendency, okay, sometimes it's better to use the virgin product when comparing, of the virgin fossil product, when comparing against bio-based alternatives. And that's where I wanted to neutralize a little bit.
Yeah. My point was to broaden the topic but we could have talked about the fossil. I agree with you in one sense, but I want to broaden the topic so that we we try and integrate a little, more parameters than we usually do. And you could also talk about microplastics,
Thank you. It's a great panel anyway.
We're going to wrap up, otherwise the guys from Primloft are going to turn ugly towards me for occupying the stage. This group are going to stick here if you want more conversations, because I'm going to fire points like at Anna. There are 13 things part of the CSR. You're right, we're just on carbon at the moment. There are another 12 we aren't talking about. I'm brought to mind that the textile exchange is withdrawing the GRS license from chemically recycled fibres. So I'm really glad that you're mechanically recycling. And finally, is it less than 1.5% of the world's oil is used for textiles? If we really want to save fossil fuels, should we be focused on textiles? But these are open questions, and we're not going to debate them now, but we can only debate so many things at one time, and I'm really grateful for the accuracy of the panel we've had. So, Sophie, over to you to wrap up.
Well, this is it. I wanted to dig deep into topics, which I try to do in my writing for WSA. And so just trying to bring the conversation forward, which is what we like to do at Performance Days. So thank you for coming.